This woman wants to deny a doctor his right to earn a living, to stop him from the practice of his profession. This man feels that to ostracize this doctor, stop him from practicing, is bigoted and unjust.
There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself. Broadcasting's original program of mediation. The Court of Human Relations. And now, the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
I think it is one of the strange truths of life that the obvious is often overlooked. And in the noisy confusion of today's world, I wonder if we're not losing sight of the fact that the basic reality of life is not machinery or politics or industry or even rockets to the moon, but human relationships. The association of a man with a woman, of a parent with a child. Man is skilled in the arts. He has learned how to harness the lightning, to ride the wind, to read the stars. But the art of living peacefully together remains the great riddle of existence. It's been said that any person who finds happiness in his relationships with other people is a successful person, even though he has failed in most everything else. You are about to witness an actual mediation proceeding dedicated to happy and harmonious human relations. The intention is to take a conflict that has timely interest and wide application, cut through to the basic issue, and determine what is just and reasonable and fair. Now, this is case number 4280. Gentlemen, I believe we have here an issue that is a challenge to the wisest consideration of this board. Well, will you tell your story?
Should a person be deprived of his right to earn a living and be ostracized, as a matter of fact, because of something in his past?
Well, what do you refer to specifically?
I refer specifically to a physician who has been in a mental institution. However, he has been discharged as cured.
What is the particular complaint that you have?
In the building in which I live, there is also a woman who resides there, and by the way, this building is the same building in which this physician has his offices. It was brought to my attention that this woman had let it be known that this physician had been in a mental institution and should not be practicing. I believe that in all fairness, that this, without knowing all of the facts, that this was an unjust, it was an unreasonable thing to do.
Are you the person referred to?
Yes, Mr. Alexander, I am.
Well, what is your opinion in this matter?
Well, I believe this man, who is a doctor, with a doctor's license, certainly should not be practicing now or in the future because he is a proven mental case. He introduced himself when he took office in this apartment as a superintendent of a sanatorium. Word came to me that this was incorrect. And with that bit of information, which came from an authentic source, I investigated.
As a matter of fact, if you don't mind my interrupting, didn't you call up various institutions and various hospitals
Well, I investigated then. I found that he couldn't be on the board of any hospital and that he was not acceptable. And certainly I wouldn't want him for a position, and certainly I wouldn't want him to take care of any of my neighbors or friends.
But you found that he was a mental patient.
He was a mental patient not only once, but several times.
Well, now, did you tell people about that?
I told some people who asked me. Yes. I would warn them against anything if they got a bad piece of meat from their butcher, or if I got a bad piece of meat from their butcher, I would certainly tell them about it.
And did you think that he was a bad piece of meat?
Well, I think he was a very imbalanced person. And we are so deluded when a doctor has a license And that permits him to put a shingle out in front. And the uninformed public take that shingle for granted and feel that that guarantees judgment, adequacy, and professional competence. And the man changes over a period of months, weeks, and even hours.
Well, then, do you think that this man, who in your opinion has changed, should be allowed to practice medicine?
No, I do not. He may have been young and vigorous and ambitious and perfectly all right when he got his license, and he takes that license to his grave regardless of what has happened to him in the meantime. But I do not consider a man, even though he's licensed as a doctor, competent to license when he has had proven imbalance emotionally and mentally, which can crop out from time to time. There is a hidden potentiality of danger there. And I don't want danger. I want competence.
Do you liken this doctor to an ex-convict?
I certainly wouldn't give him the keys of my vault until he had been taught and proven a fit member of society.
Do you consider yourself a kind of defender of the public good?
Yes, I hope I am.
The local doctors interfere in any way with this man who you feel is...
They did not, Mr. Alexander. It was complete apathy, and I consider that that apathy indicts him under the term of one word, these doctors, irresponsibility toward the welfare of their community.
Don't you think there are associations that are responsible to supervise these matters?
I don't think the associations have acted at all. The AMA is set up to protect the doctor from the patient.
Well, now we turn to the complainant. Have you had any experience with this doctor so far as his professional service is concerned?
Yes, the doctor has treated my entire family professionally. I've been treated for minor things, such as we all may get. My child was treated for a broken finger. I think this might be proved very interesting. My wife had a kidney ailment.
Did you find that his attitude was dignified, professional, efficient, competent?
I've always found it to be exactly that. As a matter of fact, I think he had an interest in the well-being of my family. Made several calls to inquire as to people's health, my family's health, after he had treated them, and showed an interest that, to me, was just marvelous.
What about his fee?
His fee is just the same as any other doctor.
Well, now, what is your characterization of this woman and her position? What do you think of her position in saying that this doctor should have his license revoked and that he shouldn't be allowed to practice and that he's a menace to the community and to society? How would you characterize this woman's position? What do you think of her position? Do you think she's authorized?
I think she had no business, absolutely no business whatsoever, to state something which, to her knowledge, was not fact.
Well, I think it's only fair under the circumstances. We've explored this case, gentlemen, I think fairly well. You have the respective viewpoints of these people, the complainant and respondent parties. I think it's only reasonable that we hear from the subject, the doctor himself. Sir, are you the person referred to this evening?
I am.
Are you a doctor of medicine?
I am.
Have you any particular specialty?
I specialize in psychiatry.
Well, now, will you tell us something about your background of mental illness?
Oh, a great many years ago, I became mentally ill. Then I got well. Since that time, I have suffered from the stigmatization and the segregation of myself by society from any opportunity to really make a good living.
What is your opinion of what society thinks about a former mental patient?
Well, if I were an ex-convict, you could expect that I would be suspect whenever a crime was committed. Suppose you were a man who had an operation for appendix, an inflamed appendix 20 years ago. Do you think it's fair for that hospital record to affect his entire future?
We understand, Doctor, that you were committed and that you were discharged. Now,
That's true.
what is your concern about the general public attitude toward that?
Society has the attitude in which it seems to respect the fact that a man has been a patient in a mental hospital, but does not respect the fact that there are court decisions. I don't think it's fair, and I wonder if you think it's fair, for a judgment to be made up on one isolated point, and important factors should be ignored.
Well, would you tell us something about the commitment? What happens when a person is committed to a mental institution?
A person loses his liberty, he loses his civil rights, and he becomes a ward of the state.
Well, now, will you tell us what the effect of the court order is after the patient is
All
discharged?
civil rights are restored.
Does that mean that you have the right to vote?
Of course.
Does it mean that you have the right to sign checks,
Of course.
to sign contracts?
Certainly.
You have all rights of a competent person.
Exactly.
And do you have these rights at the present time?
I do.
Well, now, why is it that people react as they do?
It's fear. Society is afraid of the unknown, afraid of the bad man, afraid of the former mental patient who is potentially dangerous.
Well, isn't society justified in that fear? We read in the newspapers of people who run amok, who commit the most violent crimes.
Sometimes that's true.
You mean there are a lot of mental patients who leave hospitals and are irresponsible?
Quite a few have left mental hospitals for other reasons than their sickness, and they have been forced to come back because they were still potentially dangerous.
And they're dangerous when they run amok in the community.
Well, that doesn't occur too often, but it can occur.
Well, why couldn't it occur in your case?
Because I'm well and I have the papers to prove it.
Well, Doctor, you've been stigmatized. In what particular direction would you say that has affected you most seriously?
I can't get a job. I can't make a living.
Gentlemen, you've heard both sides of this case. You've heard a statement from the doctor himself. What is your feeling about this, Dr. Davis?
Well, it would seem to me that finally it's a matter of fact. If the doctor is competent to practice his art, he certainly should not be restrained. If he is incompetent, something should be done about it. And I would guess that the authorities in such matters and the various associations have and are doing more about that than we may realize.
Well, Doctor, do you consider it unfair and unjust for this man to be talked about in a negative...
Completely and absolutely, and I would say that that probably comes very definitely out of this prejudice that has come down out of a long past. There was a time when if a man had mental illness, we called him crazy and decided that he ought to be put in an asylum for the rest of his life. Fortunately, we've come to a time when we know that that's only despicable superstition and even brutality. Mental illness today can be cured as most other illnesses can be cured. It's not different from the ordinary physical illness. Probably most of us around this table have had the measles, we've had scarlet fever, maybe we've had tuberculosis, maybe we've had more serious diseases. That doesn't mean that we still have them or that any prejudice is going to be exercised against them. And I think in this case, since mental illness has and all the time is being fully cured, it's simply a question of fact. If the man has been discharged from his hospital and if competent doctors have judged him to be well, the community should accept that decision and the man should be given every right to practice his profession.
But at the time he was practicing in this building, he came directly as a mental patient. And he was using an alias. And he had used an alias constantly, not one but two. And that would destroy my confidence.
I wonder if the respondent party would care to ask a question of the mediator.
What authorities you refer to that are acting?
Dr. Eddy?
Mr. Alexander, I'd like to point out that the policing responsibility for the competence of a doctor is located in two agencies. First of all, his own local medical association. And they are very careful to investigate any complaints of unprofessional or unsatisfactory incompetence or the performance of the duties other than are accepted in the medical profession. The second thing is the state of New York, through its licensing power, which is vested in the State Board of Regents and the State Department of Education, has the power, and the only ones that have the power to license a physician.
Therefore, what's your conclusion?
My conclusion is that if there's any evidence of incompetence, that this person is not able to practice his art and his science, there are regular channels which will investigate and determine that competence. I would like to add the personal opinion, without passing on the competence, because I have no basis for that very often those of us who have had difficulties, who have had mental problems, and I remember Dr. Menninger stating a year ago that the ratio of people in the United States who need help is not 1 in 10, but 1 in 1, meaning, as I understood his statement, that all of us at some time or other need help, sometimes very serious help. But we're just human beings that are under tension and under pressure, and we need help. Now, the man who's been through an emotional disturbance of whatever nature is more competent because he's more sensitive. He knows the processes through which the patient has passed. And he knows the insight, he has the insights and the understanding which can be helpful. And to me, it requires this healing of the heart and the mind and the emotions, requires this thing which they have ascribed to this, even the complainant, namely love. Love and science together can be very helpful in restoring people. So in the absence of any evidence that this doctor is not competent, I feel that he should be given a chance in his community with the support. And I do not think that lay people, they have the right, any citizen has the right to complain. But from a moral standpoint of human relations, a viewpoint, I think they ought to be very careful before they make a charge of which we have heard tonight.
Dr. Peel?
Well, there's one matter that I should like to clarify before I comment further. I understood this gentleman to say that the doctor healed your child of a broken finger and your wife of a kidney complaint and you of some other medical disability. Then the doctor himself says that he is a psychiatrist. Is it customary for a psychiatrist to handle the matters that you have referred to, which I've always thought came under the authority of a strictly medical man?
Well, suppose we ask the doctor. Aren't you a medical doctor?
I don't reject general practice along with my psychiatric practice.
I see. Well, I just didn't know what the custom was. Most of the psychiatrists that I know perform or practice only psychiatry, but I suppose there could be practice in combination.
It's true. If my day was filled completely with psychiatric patients, I would have no time for general practice.
I see. And the second thing I understood this lady to say is that the doctor practiced under an alias, a name not his own. Is that correct?
Well, doctor, why did you practice under an alias? Was it because you could use your own name?
Under the 1 month during which I had a job under a false name, I used the false name because going under my own name, it was impossible to get a job.
I think that's the answer.
I admit that was an error, and it did bring me up for criticism. I know I was wrong there, but I'm sorry,
Well,
a job is necessary.
I can understand, I think. But you used the phrase, get a job. Were you working for some concern as a doctor, or were you practicing privately?
I never used an alias practicing privately. I was working for the department.
I think I can explain that if I may. Dr. Peel, because this man was unable to practice privately due to the very kind of thing that has come up here, it was necessary for him to apply for positions in institutions of various kinds that needed a staff physician. And in such instance, because on the application he would have been rejected, he simply used a different name.
Well, I merely raise these questions, which may be small details, but it seems that it fills out the picture. I should like to say that I appreciate the concern this lady has. She's evidently a very serious-minded, public-spirited person. I also appreciate the concern that this gentleman has about the matter. I think that I must line up with my two colleagues here that mental illness can be cured. We know that it can. I don't like the alias idea, but the doctor, I suppose, had the same fear of which he speaks and also the practical considerations. I feel that our friend here should take another channel, and that would be to explore. If she feels that he's engaging in malpractice or not qualified to practice, that the effort should be made to have this adjudged by competent authorities. And I think I have a little more respect for the local county medical society and the American Medical Association than has been expressed by our complainant friend here. That if this doctor is not competent, they should pass upon it, and his reputation as a doctor should not be called into question, I think, until that should be done. And I think it's perfectly in your rights to do it if you feel that the circumstances justify. But it seems to me that's the only procedure to take.
And that seems to be the unanimous opinion of this board. I think, to sum up, that what could be a very complicated matter can be reduced to its simple essential elements, that what we have is an instance of a human being who has suffered misfortune trying to rehabilitate himself, become a useful member of society. And there is documentary evidence of his discharge as cured from a hospital. There is a court order establishing his legal and mental competence, and it's the considered opinion of the board that if what is involved is the protection of the public, that it is a matter for official agencies, not the decision of an individual, however well-intended. The board is in definite agreement that if it is established that a person has been cured, it's the decent thing for every person to help, not hinder him to resume a rightful place in life. As we express our thanks to our mediators and look forward to another session of the Court of Human Relations, I'm reminded of the admonition, if there is a difference or coolness or unkindness between us, let us talk things over in an atmosphere of reason and of calm and of understanding. It is always better to light a candle, said a wise man, than to curse the darkness.